don't find them like more support for these structures, we are actually going to be using these structures. So, and the analysis that we will do here, that we have for Kachi, is actually rather different from what you will have seen me do so far. So what we have to capture a bunch of ideas, right? So the one thing we want to capture is that when you have perfective tenses, the agreement that you end up with. So let me put up the key here. Yeah. So we'll be using these structures, and we'll be assuming, in this case, we'll be assuming that both T and V have, that the T has a number probe, a person probe indicated by pi, and a number probe, and V has a number probe and a gender probe. Okay, so okay, this is the state of affairs. And what we're going to assume is that both of these probes are going to probe in the natural fashion. And most importantly, for Kachi, we are not actually going to assume that the ergative, the features of the ergative are invisible. We will let the features of the ergative be visible. Okay, so, which is not an implausible idea. I mean, first of all, we know that there is nothing written in stone about the idea that the features of the ergative are invisible, right? We have Nepali, right? And moreover, this is a language where the features of the ergative are not expressed nominally, so why not? Okay. Then, so what's going to happen is this is going to agree in this case with this guy, and this is going to agree with this guy. Okay. Once you have done this, what you end up with is a situation where you have two sets of independent features floating around. You have the features of T and the features of little v. The features of the subject on T, the features of the object on little v. When you have this situation, we make one more assumption here, that in Kachi at least, Kachi only has the featural wherewithal to express one set of features. It cannot simultaneously realize both features of the subject and features of the object. This is not a general fact. There are languages which are perfectly capable of realizing three sets of features at the same time. Kashmiri is one such language, but this is not such a language. Here you have two sets of features and they are apart. So in this case, what happens is the language makes a choice. It says, when I have two sets of features, I am going to realize the higher set of features. Okay. The higher probe does not have gender. Okay. It only has person and number. Okay. So that's hold that thought in mind. On the other hand, let's look here. Okay. So here we are going to do one additional innovation. So it's clear this guy is going to enter into a relationship with this. Now this guy starts probing, and here this is different from what I've told you before. This guy starts probing, it immediately hits a brick wall. Okay. At this point, it doesn't stop probing, it probes up. Basically it reprojects, and now it probes its sister. So now it probes this. And then one more thing happens, there is fusion between T and V. They have the features of the same head and they come together. Okay. And when this happens, then you have the features. So the idea is defective agreement happens when T and V probe different things. And full agreement happens when T and V end up probing the same DP. Okay, so instead of it cannot go down, it comes up, and when it comes up, both these heads end up with this. So from this point onwards, nothing exciting is going to happen here. This is just going to give you full agreement. Okay, so that's at least good. Let's stare at this. Okay, so we have this situation. So now let's look at the morphology of this, so which is going to be on page. Yes, so let's look at page 25. Yes, there was a question? Yes. This? Yes, yes. Okay, so there are a number of things that I'm doing differently. One of them, so in this case, T probes down and gets the features of DP. That's fine. Then this V starts to probe down. But this barrier, this domain, is a barrier, you cannot probe over it. Okay, so now two things could happen. This thing could just stop probing, which is what would happen in the system that we had been playing with before. Okay, but now we follow, in this paper we follow a system by Behar and Rezach, which is called cyclic agree, where probes probe down, but if they don't find anything in their domain, then they can probe up. Okay, so they can't probe arbitrarily up. What they can do is they can probe their specifier. And the notion there is that this V head, that the V prime, this projection of the V head, it's basically the same as the V head. Okay, and then the V head, if it projects up until this point, this can see its specifier. So this is a crucial innovation. This is different from what I have been saying. So in fact, I have said explicitly that little V heads of unergative predicates are not going to case license their specifiers. But this system would allow them to at least inherently case license their specifiers. The fact is, you need, if you're doing inherent case, inherent case is being assigned by a head to its specifier, you need something like this. Because otherwise, how would you ever assign inherent case, right? So if you want to subsume inherent case under some kind of if inherent case is assigned in this configuration, right? If this is, one could say no, inherent case is only assigned in this configuration, right? Then it would be fine. But there are cases where we assign inherent case in this. In fact, according to Ellen Wolford, this is the configuration in which you get what she calls inherent case, while this is the configuration in which you get lexical case. Okay, so you probably need something like this. So now this guy looks up and finds features here and agrees with this. At this point, both T and V have access to features of the same head, and what we assume is that when T and V have features of the same head, then you can combine them. And when you combine them, then what happens is that you get complete agreement. And by complete agreement, I mean agreement in all features. While in this case, V can see the features of the object, it agrees with that, and so now T only has features of the subject, but only pi and number, no gender. So this is something we are assuming, that independently of the probes that we put up there, T does not have a gender probe. Okay. So let's look at 18 on page 25. Okay, so this is this case. So what we have is T ends up with 3 singular features, even though the subject has both feminine and masculine features. I mean, not at the same time, but the subject could have gender features, but those features are not, they don't make it to T. Only the number and the gender feature makes it to T. Okay. And then the features of the object make it to V, but then they stay there. So at this point you have third singular, and now let's see what's going on. So now you have your singular vocabulary items. A is the special feature. It's the feature that appears in the form ve. Okay? And that's the singular. And you have O and E. O is singular masculine, E is singular feminine. So what happens is, so now this is a nice case, because this is what you will see is a system that we see that is used to some effect in distributed morphology, that you see under specification and competition. So now if you imagine a situation where you have something like John arrived, or John has arrived, and arrived has masculine singular features, then both 19A and 19B will match, but 19B will win, because you want to insert the most specific feature possible. So when you're inserting features, you don't have to realize every feature, but you can only realize features which are there. You can't put in random other features. Okay. Now look at 18. So in 18 you're trying to realize T, which is 3 singular. Okay. Very importantly, it's not 3 masculine singular or 3 feminine singular, it's just 3 singular. Okay. So let's say we are not realizing, don't worry about 3 right now. In principle, you are not allowed to use either B or C. I mean, not in principle, you are not allowed to use B or C. You can, the only thing you can, it's a very good thing that the language has A, because if it didn't, you wouldn't know what to do here, right? You wouldn't have anything to put here. So it's a very nice thing that, I mean, it's kind of a, not almost a conspiracy, right? That it's, I guess if you're Kutchi, right, and your syntax is going to give you these forms, then you had better have something to put in them, because otherwise when the sentence will come, you will suddenly, you'll be struck speechless. You wouldn't know what to do. And on the other hand, let's look at, say, Gujarati. Gujarati does not have an exponent like 19A, because in Gujarati there will never be a situation where the grammar will give you a structure where you don't have A. Where you have just the singular form. Right. So in the Kutchi system, this is sort of what we end up with. I mean, actually, so to tell you the truth, I have not actually worked through the system in the I have not tried to do Gujarati. It may be that if you try to do Gujarati with this, you will end up with Kutchi. So there might be something to push here. But in the context of Gujarati, you can see, of Kutchi, you can see that the A form is going to be used in exactly those environments where the syntax is not giving you gender. Okay, so this is what's happening here is not syncretism of any sort. It's there is a less specified form and there are more specified forms. If the syntax gives you more features, then you use the more specified forms. When the syntax doesn't give you those features, you use those forms. Okay, and also you only bring in new forms when a gender neutral form is not available. Okay. Now recall, in the present tense, we were talking about the present tense auxiliary, right? We said in the present tense, despite that incorrect glossing, the present tense actually did not have gender. So when you do the present tense, then there's no problem. You just use the present tense forms. You don't need to invent a new form. You only need to invent a new form when you don't have genderless forms. if all of your forms have explicitly, if each form that you have explicitly indicates gender, then you will not be able to use a gender, then you will not be able to use those forms. But if they are not indicating gender, then you're all set. So that's basically what's going on here. Okay? So that's one thing. Now there is one other idea that I want to talk about, which is that so how do we get object agreement? Okay, so so let me think whether I want to do the intermediate step. Actually, let me take you through the intermediate step. Let me show you. I'll have to make you go back a little bit. In fact, quite a little bit. So yes, I'll write these things out. Okay, I'm going to write out the present auxiliaries on the board. So the present auxiliaries are singular, plural, 1, 2, 3, ia, IU, IO, okay. This is the full table of the present aux. Okay. Then, however, the table of the aux in the perfective tenses is much simpler. It's singular, plural, I, 2, okay. Let's do a derivation and see what we expect. Okay, so if we do a derivation with a second singular subject, okay, so let me draw this out again. P bar, P, P, V, T, P. This part is in a way it's not irrelevant. Yeah, it's not going to do much work for us. So, okay, so this is going to have, let's say it's second feminine singular. Then your T would expect to collect 2 singular, okay, and suppose this is the present auxiliary. So we go and look here. We should get IE. We don't get that. We get this. So the sentence would be something like you singular and yeah, it have eaten the apples. Okay, this is the sentence, and so there is a puzzle here. So all else being the same, we should just look at what we get from here, and we have this nice form. We should just use this nice form. Okay. But actually, we don't get this. This is the table, we get this. So now comes an innovation that we have. What we say happens in Kutchi is that before we send these things off to spell out, in certain circumstances,